Good morning and welcome to your Partner in Success Radio. I am your host, Denise Griffitts, and this podcast has been bringing you conversations with authors, entrepreneurs, mentors, and business leaders for almost 18 years now. And we are honored to be ranked in the top 1.5% of podcasts worldwide. My guest today is Paul Austin-Menear. Now, he is the founder of Six Catalysts, and he's the voice behind The Journey, his publication and podcast for entrepreneurs who want fewer bumps on the road to building something meaningful. I love that, fewer bumps on the road. In this conversation, we're digging into the real impact that entrepreneurs have on their local communities. This is not something we talk about much here, probably because it hasn't been offered. So I'm fascinated. And he wants to tell us how even the smallest businesses can spark resilience, how entrepreneurship clarifies purpose, why proximity creates better solutions, and why local first doesn't mean thinking small. And we are sponsored today by Mitch Weisberg. He is the author of Mind Shifting: Stop Your Brain from Sabotaging Your Happiness and Success. And I recommend this book because number one, I have it, I've read it, I pick it up a lot. And because Mitch addresses something that most of us wrestle with, how our own thoughts and patterns can get in the way. I have a squirrel brain. I'm constantly reassessing what I'm thinking. He doesn't just describe the problem, he gives you practical tools to recognize those habits and replace them with ones that create clarity, confidence, and real forward movement. Mind shifting isn't an abstract theory, it's a hands on guide that you can use daily to stop the self sabotage and start building the life, excuse me, and success you're aiming for. You can find it on Amazon. And in my opinion, it is well worth adding to your success library. So now back to my guest. Paul grew up in a small town and he now works in Canada's biggest city. So he brings both a grassroots perspective and a wide lens view of what it takes to build strong, resilient communities. Before launching Six Catalysts, I love that name. I'm going to get him to tell us what that means. He spent a decade helping scale a consumer electronics startup from a sketch on a cocktail napkin. We hear these stories to global distribution in more than 100 countries. I can't talk today. Now he helps small business owners and early stage founders build clarity, momentum, and operational excellence while keeping their purpose front and center. Paul, good morning. Thank you for joining us today. But before we get started, tell us a bit about you and your story.
Good morning, Denise. I am very, very grateful to be here. Thanks for having me on the show, and howdy to everybody who's listening. Wow, about me, I mean, you did a pretty great job of covering off the bases at the start there. Like you mentioned, I grew up in a small town. In between moving to, Toronto from that small town, I kind of bounced around some of the mid-tier cities in Canada, working mostly in marketing and communications. I worked for an ad agency kind of right out of university. I spent some time in Europe, working and living for a little bit, and then came back home, moved to Toronto, and joined this consumer IoT smart lighting company called Nanoleaf. That was about a decade ago, and at some point, builders just need to keep on building stuff. So last year, I went out on my own and kind of said to myself, geez, should I start a business, or should I start a business that helps other people be successful in their businesses? And really, I chose the latter because I very, very firmly, strongly believe that entrepreneurship is one of the best ways that you can build better communities and build a better life for yourself and, be more resilient all around.
And I'm so glad you're here to talk about this because honestly, this is not a topic that really comes up on this podcast. So you're building new ground here. So thank you for that. And listen, I agree with you. I live in Southwest Louisiana. Hurricane season is just about over in a few days. We haven't had one this year. I'm knocking on wood. I'm knocking on the top of my head. But I live here because I wanted quiet. I didn't want an
Hmm.
HOA. I wanted a small, tight community, and it is. And I'm noticing, and this hadn't happened for a while, it was called a village for the longest kind of time. And then we grew up and it became a community because people were starting to invest in this area, building, in networking, and it just kind of happened all at once. It was the darndest thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, what do you tell people? I guess my question is, what are some signs that a community is ready to support new entrepreneurs? And this is probably just as important. What signs tell you the opposite? When do you need to hold back and maybe reassess?
Yeah, that word entrepreneur and entrepreneurship, it can mean so many different things to so many different people, right? Like if you say the word entrepreneur to some people, that'll mean let's build a factory. Let's build a tour group service. Let's build a business that involves capital, right? Like buying equipment, hiring people. And those are really good for a community. But that's not all that entrepreneurship is. Entrepreneurship is also, the bookkeeper who lives down the street who does the books for other small businesses. Entrepreneurship is also someone who builds websites, someone who writes content, someone who does advertising, jingles, whatever it might be. Those are all entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurship is when you primarily build something, you create something that doesn't exist, and you're working for the benefit of yourself and those around you. So communities of all sizes, they have different kind of requirements to be ready for entrepreneurship. It doesn't always look the same. If you think about a big city, like the one that I live in, being ready for entrepreneurship kind of happens just by the nature of there being a bunch of people in the same place. Like there's density of knowledge, of ideas, of ambitions. But when you think about a smaller town, being ready for entrepreneurship can be a little bit more under the radar. It doesn't quite appear in the same way. You might have a town council talking about we want to attract business investment, so we're going to have an economic development agency. Here in Canada, that's kind of typical. You have smaller towns and less populated areas that have economic development agencies that go out and they try and bring in investment and they try and bring in opportunities for people to start businesses. But what I find is the most effective thing for smaller areas to be really prepared to spark entrepreneurship is to consolidate people and energy so that creative ideas can collide together. And that often, it sounds like it needs a lot of work and a lot of fancy stuff. But in practice, what really kind of plays out is you have clubs, entrepreneurship clubs or networking clubs. They meet at the local coffee shop. It might be like a Tim Hortons or a Dunkin' or something once a week, and they just talk, right? So you don't need to have a whole lot of stuff for a community to be ready for entrepreneurship. You just have to have people who are willing to put in time and energy and talk about their ideas openly with other people. It's much more of a cultural thing than we might think.
It is. And Dr. Napoleon Hill talked a lot about mentorships and, putting just what you're talking about, putting people together in a group, masterminding.
Hmm.
And that does make
Yeah, and
sense.
the Yeah, and that mastermind concept is so great. There are, and you find that often, founders, serial founders, repeat founders who have started businesses and then started businesses again, they get really into that concept. And there's a cottage industry that has sprung up more seriously in the past 5, 6 years, I would say. It's always existed, but there's a bit of a cottage industry in creating networking groups specifically for founders and owners of companies. And they're typically, paid groups where you'll get together with your peer group, a couple of times a month. There might be retreats or trips or something that happen, quarterly or yearly or whatever they call them, like strategic retreats where you think about your business outside of your business. And it's really quite smart. Those clubs, those groups that kind of form, not only do they help entrepreneurs work on their businesses, but they solve a bit of another problem that is kind of endemic to entrepreneurship, and that's the problem of loneliness. When you're an entrepreneur, you are especially an entrepreneur that kind of grows a business and hires employees. That model, that thing where I talked about, where you're buying equipment and everything. When you're that kind of entrepreneur, you're typically wired a bit differently than other people. So it's difficult to talk about your challenges because other people, you feel like they just won't understand them. And to some kind of extent that's true. If I went to all of my friend group and said to them like, "Hey, I'm thinking about buying a building today, and I'm worried about this, that, and the other thing," I just kind of get back blank stares. So it can be a little bit isolating because you're quite different from the majority of people out there. So these groups kind of solve that problem. And I think that's one of the reasons why they've become so popular, kind of coming out of the pandemic era where people are, getting back together in person. Life is kind of resuming in a more normal way. That need that you have to kind of connect with other people as an entrepreneur, it's still there, right?
It is. And I wanted to, and I wrote this down because it hit me when you were talking about entrepreneurs. I didn't want to forget to ask you. I've had so many conversations with people say, well, I'm not really an entrepreneur. I'm more
Mm,
of a solopreneur. And
yeah.
instantly I think, well, you're playing small.
Mm.
Am I wrong?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So I would say the we have always thought of solopreneurs and consultants and advisors and people who came before them as as yeah, kind of playing small micro businesses. I refer to this in my book as micro entrepreneurship. But the way that technology has advanced, even in the past few years, it is quite possible for one person with the support of a few virtual assistants to create a business that does a significant amount of revenue that 20, 25 years ago you would have had to hire a team of 5 or 10 for. So even though we kind of think of solopreneurs as playing small ball, they're not necessarily doing that anymore. And kind of another question that always comes up for me when this topic comes up of playing small ball, um, what's wrong with that? The way that I think about micro entrepreneurship now is okay, if I have the choice to go out and work for a big corporation or a company to earn my salary, and maybe I don't find that very fulfilling, it doesn't work for my life, or I can work for myself, pursue the things that I find professionally interesting, and make enough money to live that same life. What's wrong with that? It's a good thing. So, you might
Exactly.
not think of it as entrepreneurship, you might think of it as working for yourself, but at the end of the day, you're doing the same thing. You're making
Eh,
money so you can live
Right.
your life.
Right. And I think what I was trying to express and probably I did do it poorly, is that when people say, oh, I'm not an entrepreneur, I'm a solopreneur,
Mm,
I do go, well, you're playing small, but what I really meant to say is in your mind, you're playing small. You're limiting
yeah,
yourself.
yeah, yeah. And I often advise clients who are kind of in this position and thinking about this solopreneur thing, entrepreneur thing. One of the first things I ask them is, why does the label matter? Let's talk about what you want. What are your objectives? Do you want to carve out a life just for you, and have the money that you need to live your life? If so, great. Do you want to build something? Do you want to attract other people to it? Do you want to create something that grows beyond just what you're capable of? Yes? Okay. If that's the case, let's figure that out. So there are many different paths that you can take to entrepreneurship. And you're right. I do find that people who describe themselves as solopreneurs, they often set this mental barrier in place and they do limit themselves a little bit. But if you're a bookkeeper, maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe you don't want to grow forever and ever and ever. Maybe you need some limitations. Maybe you need some constraints so that you can still enjoy the fruits of your labor. You have enough time to do
And see, you just explained what I was trying to ask. So thank you. I
that.
appreciate that. It's like I know I came up and I couldn't articulate it well, but you understood it. So I appreciate that a lot. Paul, where do you see small businesses, especially locally, making the biggest difference that often goes unnoticed?
Yeah, coming again, kind of coming out of the pandemic, I think that everyone, regardless of the size of your community, everyone was starved a little bit for human connection. And this is one of the areas where I think that small businesses, especially micro businesses, can kind of step in and there can be a little bit more activity in it. So if you think about kind of today, and we're hearing in the news there are mass layoffs happening almost every day of the week, right? And, it causes anxiety, causes panic. Like people who do have a job working for a large company and they think they're secure, they start to think, oh, well, maybe I'm not quite as secure as I thought I was. Maybe I should do something different. Maybe I should have a backup plan. Maybe I should pursue working for myself at least part time to kind of hedge against that risk of being laid off. When it's one person, you kind of think, okay, that's smart. Good for them. I wish you luck. But what if it's 10,000 people? What if it's
Right.
100,000 people? And those people, just by the nature of starting what they're doing, they have to go network. They have to go talk to each other. So all of a sudden, we have more social energy, we have more connections, we have more conversation about ideas happening. And that's where coming back to this idea of like density and acceptance or willingness to talk about ideas openly in these communities being really the driver for entrepreneurship. With all of these people saying, I need a backup plan and starting to talk about it, those are some of the catalysts that really start to drive thinking about entrepreneurship in communities. And ultimately, that is good for communities. What they say is that half of all new businesses fail.
Yeah, I've
Okay,
heard that.
within the first couple of years, it's kind of a thing. That statistic's been around forever, right? But the thing about that statistic is that it doesn't factor in the increased density of knowledge and ideas that you get in entrepreneurial areas, right? So the more talk there is about entrepreneurship, the more knowledge gets shared back and forth, the more learnings there are. And learnings, like they come from failure much, much more than they do success, right?
Oh,
So it's
I can
actually,
talk about that all day long.
I'm sure we both can.
I will tell anybody who will listen, if you're an entrepreneur at any level, any description, you better have a cast iron. Yeah, because you're going to fall on your butt multiple times a day.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and I talk about this in my book too, which is still a work in progress. It's coming out next year, but I talk about this in my book too. Cultures, communities which have a permissiveness around failure tend to have higher density of entrepreneurship and more successful entrepreneurs in greater numbers over time. So, one of the key things that as a community, a group of people, or a geographical community, you need to do is you need to put in place the systems and the cultural acceptance of failure to be successful. It's that idea of, okay, I'm going to start a business and it's not going to work, but I'm going to learn from it, do it again. Maybe that won't work. I will learn from that. I will do it again. Oh, geez, it's successful. With one person, it's that single story, and maybe it's not that impressive. But when you look at the numbers, again, 10,000, 100,000. What if 100,000 people started businesses? Let's say that half of those failed as predicted after 2 years. Okay, 50,000 businesses, 50,000 people. But then what if they started all over again? In 2 years, 25,000. In 2 years, 12,500. See where I'm going? The more
And
that this
yes,
snowball rolls, the more success accumulates.
right. And you mentioned, communities and geographic, your geographical area. I'm an introvert. I'm not going to go meet anybody. I don't even like to go to
Yeah.
Walmart. So that's never going to work for me. But my community, honestly, is my podcast. It's my clients.
Hmm.
It's my friends. And that's where I learn the most. So I guess what
Hmm.
I'm trying to say is that you don't have to go stand in the village green and say, I'm going to do this. Everybody look at me. I'm going to do something. You can do it online very easily.
Hmm. Hmm.
So, and then
Absolutely.
you talked about that before, I know.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's, the kids these days, they have a saying, and it's go find your people. And that's absolutely right. Going and finding your people, it doesn't have to be an exercise that you do out in the physical world through, networking groups or clubs, chambers of commerce. Like you don't have to take that path. You can absolutely find a digital community. And a community doesn't have to be a geographic one, like you said, Denise. Like a community can be formed around mutual interest. So if you're interested in something, go and find people who are also interested in it online. Talk about it. You can build a community that way. You can join a community that way. You don't have to go out and, spend all of your energy being around other people.
No, I can't. I really, really can't. I can be around live people for 59 3/4 minutes. That's it. I'm done. Gotta go home now. I've timed it. I've got to go now. So I'm not joking. I wish I was. Okay, how can
No, and
founders go ahead?
just to come back to that, that's great. And for anybody who this makes me a little bit nervous, a little bit anxious, that's actually good because you have self-awareness of your limitations. And having awareness of your limitations is kind of a big deal. It takes a lot of people a long time to realize and to learn what their limitations actually are. So if you know what they are, even if it's just a feeling, as opposed to thinking about it cogently in your mind, you're ahead of the game. Don't fight that, lean into it. Instead of saying this limitation, this anxiety that I have, being around people in public, I need to work to change that. Like if you want to work to change that, great. But if you really don't, then you know about it so you can adapt to
I really don't. I like being all
it.
by myself. I'm not shy and I don't have any filters that I've ever come across, but I am a deeply committed introvert and I am fine with that. So let's go back to founders. Like, founders, how do
Mhm.
they, and thank you for that. I appreciate that. How do founders measure community impact beyond, this is important, y'all, listen, beyond revenue and job creation? Because there is a lot of community impact, whether you're talking to you're in Canada, I'm in the United States. We have impact on one another. How do
Mhm.
you measure that?
Yeah, yeah. So for there is kind of a special class of entrepreneurship called social purpose entrepreneurship, and they really don't work towards revenue as kind of their outcome. They look at revenue as the resources and kind of the funding that they need to carry on their mission. So they'll operate much more pardon me, they'll operate much more like third sector organizations, nonprofits, or charities, and they'll have impact statements, they'll have goals, they'll have metrics. If you think about, for example, let's say a social purpose entrepreneur who wants to make filtered water, clean drinking water, more accessible for areas that need it. Up here in Canada, the far north, it's very, very difficult to get clean drinking water. So let's say that entrepreneurial group, that person, wants to do that. They would measure impact in things like reduction of boil water advisories in a community, or they would measure it in terms of clean drinking water or fresh drinking water provided at a particular cost, right? So they'd look at it through the lens of we're trying to do this, and these are the metrics that lead to it. So let's focus on those. And the revenue just funds what we're trying to do. There's that class of entrepreneurs. But for entrepreneurs who are kind of in it to make money, but also want to have an impact on their community, one of the things that I kind of think about the most is can you visibly see your community improving when you're out and you're walking around? If you think about Main Street, a small town, do people seem happier? Do they seem busy? Are they doing stuff? Like, as an entrepreneur who wants a strong community around me while I contribute to it economically, those would be the things that I'm looking at. Is my community a better place to be?
And that makes sense. I live, like I say, in a rural area. It used to be. This when I bought this house between hurricanes, actually, it was really it was a plantation ground. There was
Yeah.
my little neighborhood, 3 streets wide, 3 streets deep, and then they started cutting down everything. Sugarcane fields disappeared, trees disappeared. Now I don't like it no more. There's too many people,
No,
but
no.
everybody's happy. It's a good community. My neighborhood, the one behind me, the one next to me, because I walk the dog out there. Everybody's happy. We all still say, "Hey, how
Yeah.
are you doing?" We don't know each other, but hey, how are you? Some of them know my dog because she breaks loose and goes visiting. She goes walkabout. So, oh, hey, Hannah, how are you? And I think, oh, geez, it's embarrassing. But you're right. I mean, you don't have to be wandering around downtown or anywhere. You can see it in your own neighborhood because
Yeah.
they're reflecting what's going on in the bigger community.
Yeah, and the business world, like the system that we all kind of use to create prosperity capitalism, it it does a very very good job at helping us create more efficient businesses that can scale. So we essentially capitalism is a system that helps us make more money, right, over time. Everything gets optimized, but there's a big divergence between metrics that you hear about, like gross domestic product and gross domestic product per capita, which are very money driven, and actual happiness. There's no real correlation between happiness and GDP or GDP per capita. So we don't have a great way to measure the actual happiness of people and the social resilience of our communities and our countries under this system. So we need something different. And in the absence of those very concrete ways to measure those things, we have to kind of put our finger, lick it, stick it up in the air and say, are people around us happier? Yes or no?
Right, right. And I do that walking the dog.
Yeah.
I've been here for a while and at no point, even during COVID, did I see that people were just miserable. They weren't, they're fine, which
Yep.
made me happy because I thought, okay, I'm where I need to be for right now. I wanted to
Yep.
ask you, what questions should a new founder ask themselves before launching something to make sure that their business actually aligns with who they are? Because I see this, and I'm sure you do as well. And I call it, squirrel brain or shiny object syndrome. It's like, oh, I'm going to go do that. I'm going to go do that. You don't know what you're doing. It's not really who you are. Now what?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, you're right. I run into that pretty much every day, myself included, but also clients and folks that I work with, and it's a bit of a tough problem to kind of tackle. Because when I talked a little bit earlier about creative energy, and there's this collision of ideas, and ultimately that's what makes for an entrepreneurial community, and that's what kind of gets the snowball rolling. Squirrel brain is kind of that. So you can't necessarily say to your squirrel brain, like, don't talk to me, go put it in the corner. It's more a question of you need to channel those impulses and that energy. And typically what I kind of advise and work with clients on, I also have an advisory on demand service that is a bit like coaching, but more like kind of strategic partnership coaching. Like it's about the business, not the person. Typically, what I advise folks who are in that position to do is like lean into it, but in a way that you are rapidly iterating. So if you have a new idea for something, before you invest, the entire farm in it, come up with a process to test it and see how viable it is by actually trying to do it. And I came up with a framework to do this called the scalable feedback engine that I wrote about and talked about on my podcast a while ago. And it kind of runs people how to do this step by step. And really, it kind of starts with, okay, I've got an idea. The next part is, how do I take this idea and execute on it in the least expensive, cheapest way possible? And what are the conditions that are going to tell me whether or not it's been successful and I can actually scale it up? So you kind of think about those things at the start and then you go do it. I find that that's a very kind of constructive way to tackle the squirrel brain problem without, emptying your bank account out completely.
Oh, I've got a squirrel brain. We have chats all the time. I think I'm going to name it. I don't know. I'm trying not to get that personal with it, but yeah, I think we all have that. Focus is a problem. When you're constantly, especially these days, when everything's online, when you're working online, I work, totally online. I'm completely digital.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
I do my level best not to get distracted, but it happens. It sneaks in. And then all of a sudden, an hour later, you're going, where was I? What
Yep,
happened there? So you
yep,
have to be careful with
absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. And distraction is chronic distraction is one of the things that can really tank your day and your week quite easily. So everybody needs to kind of figure out how to handle chronic distraction. themselves, but people who struggle with it, like generally I say, hey, put your phone in a different room.
Yep. I do it
If
all the
you
time.
yeah, me too, me too. And there are folks who taking calls as a part of their business. That's fine. Just go into your iPhone, your Android settings, and make it so that your phone will ring. But all of the little bing bongs from email and social media and games and whatever, those are shut off when you're trying to focus. And absolutely get your phone out of your eyesight. I find that helps immensely. Then there are other things you can do, like mindfulness, like listening to certain types of music that calm you and put you in like a focused mindset. But ultimately, for folks who really struggle with chronic distraction, you've got to go through that process of thinking about yourself and your own responses to stimuli. Once you understand the stimuli that really throw you off track, you can start to address them a little bit.
You know what I do? I go open
Mm,
my refrigerator door. You know, we all get to the refrigerator. We don't remember going there. We don't know why we're there. We're just looking at the stuff. We don't even know why. And I will deliberately go in there, and I've got a double door refrigerator, and I open it up and I
uh,
stick as much of my torso and my face in there as I can. And I go blank. And it's
yeah,
deliberate.
that's
It
That
works.
that's smart. That I can
Yeah,
totally see that working because
it
there are a bunch of
does.
folks I'm sure who also go to the refrigerator door. They open it up and they're like, "What did I actually come here for? What do I want to eat? I don't know." And their mind goes blank. So if you're just
Right.
trying to clear out some noise from your brain, like I could see that working pretty well.
Well, I stay, yeah, and I stay in there. I cool down for starters because once I'm in squirrel brain, I get hot. My body
Yeah.
physically gets hot. So I'm in there to cool down and to blank everything out. But when the door starts buzzing, I'm like, okay, I can go back home now. And I go back in here to the command center and I'm okay. I've cleared off that. Yeah, I've cleared. Now I'm ready to tackle something that needed to be done or go
Yeah.
do something different, but it works. I call it the open refrigerator door syndrome. It works.
There you go.
So
There you go.
you mentioned, well, we've been talking about community, but you also mentioned scaling a little bit ago. So what does
hmm
healthy scaling look like from your perspective?
hmm Yeah, so I wrote about this recently too. When you have kind of one of those fabled startup businesses that gets a ton of institutional investing, and you're trying to scale up, it looks very, very different from if you're, a self-funded entrepreneur, micro entrepreneur, small business, what have you, and you're primarily scaling up with earnings from your own business. Those two pathways are very, very different. In the venture money kind of world, you get a nine-figure check or an eight-figure check or a seven-figure check, and your job is to immediately spend that money as quickly as you can to grow as quickly as you can because the investors need their returns. And ultimately, that introduces a lot of risk that you'll grow too fast and you won't be sustainable. So taking on outside funding is a bit risky sometimes. Though the other side of that, if you're kind of self-funded, you're an entrepreneur and you're growing a business without outside funding, maybe you've got a commercial loan from a bank, but there isn't a ton of pressure to bring, returns back to the investors. You just have to pay off the loan. It's a little bit lower key. You want to be growing your business in more of a sustainable way. So I call these camel businesses. They're, just kind of like camels that are wandering through the desert. They can put resources, water and whatnot in their back. They can survive through drought. They're very adaptive. Smaller businesses that are growing and are self-funded, you should be kind of looking to grow that way. So instead of chasing big opportunities that you don't necessarily have the expertise or the capabilities to confidently execute on, think more about how can I build a resilient team? How can I build resilient systems that can adapt to change? How can I make my business operate extremely effectively? When you look at growing your business like that and you're looking at the long term, things tend to be a little bit smoother when you go from A to B. So the scaling work that I do with organizations tends to focus around that. How can we get the right people on the problem? How can we get the customer feedback from customers into the business effectively and use it to continuously innovate over time, how can we get the right systems in place that support people as they grow, right? So it's a more intentional approach to scaling versus just dumping a whole bunch of money into a problem, hiring a ton of people, firing a ton of people, and creating chaos. Like I much prefer the camel versus the unicorn.
I like that. I wrote that down. So, where do founders most often lose their connection to customers as they grow? You're talking about
Ah,
growing and
yeah.
growing fast. How do they prevent that?
Yeah. Yeah, and that one that one's particularly tough. When you're starting a business from scratch, when you're that founder who is very, very hands-on, you're right on the front lines with the rest of your people. You're talking to customers every single day, and you're trying to figure out what sticks. You're intimately involved in that process. A lot of founders are like that. I'm like that. But the challenge is, I call this the paradox of success. The challenge is that when you find that thing that sticks as the founder and you've identified it, you've kind of honed in on your product market fit and you've figured out, all right, this is what we need to do to grow and scale. Typically, what happens is that founder who held all of the institutional knowledge about the customers and the relationships, they start to steer a little bit away from the customers and kind of that relationship management process and the market. And they start focusing their time on operations, supply chain, technology, and putting in place the planks that they need to grow the business. Now, a lot of the founders won't who get into this position, they're time anorexic, like they've got no time to do anything. So they don't think too much about how to replace that institutional knowledge and how to maintain the connections between the business and its customers. You might get into a situation where you have a sales team and the sales team, they go do that. But is the sales team asking about the product or service? What could be better? What customers need? They're trying to close deals most of the time, right?
Right.
So the way to combat this problem is to, like most other things, be intentional about it. If you're that founder that needs to step away from the direct customer relationships and taking in the feedback and refine the product, if you know you've got to step away from that, then at the very start of that process, you need to think through who can replace you in that function because it's a critical function. And what I generally advocate for, and this is part of my scalable feedback engine framework that I mentioned before, what I generally advocate for is that you appoint a customer champion. When you're just small and you're starting out, your customer champion tends to be an existing employee. It's someone relatively senior who knows the business, knows the customers, and understand how things operate. You start to shift them more into a role where their primary responsibility is to maintain bridges between customers and your internal team, stakeholders, people who can make a difference in the product or service development. And that champion's job is to take feedback, think about it, turn it into insights that can be used by your organization, your business, and then send it to the people who can affect change and chase them. So
So
they
basically,
become,
an SOP.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's what this system is kind of all about, the scalable feedback engine. It's an SOP for innovation. And it helps founders who need to move on to other areas still maintain that kind of magic that really caused them to find product market fit in the first place. Because it's not something that happens by luck or chance the second time. The second time it has to be the result of intention, or else it probably won't materialize for you.
Because you learn something. We all fail. We all do. I mean,
Yep.
that's just part of how we grow. We did it when we were kids. We would try to stand up and we'd fall on the coffee table. We'd try to ride a
Yeah,
bike.
absolutely.
I've still got scars on my knees. It's what you do. You just get up and you try it again. And I wanted to ask you, um, I'm scribbling down notes. It's just crazy. I might be asking this for myself, but entrepreneurs are, excuse me, hang on a second. I am losing my voice. Entrepreneurs are often praised for grit, but, and again, I
Uh-huh.
might be asking this for myself, when does grit cross the line into stubbornness? Or, as my dear mother would say, boneheaded, pig-headed? I don't
Yeah,
know
I
what
think
she
those
meant by that. I thought it was rude.
Yeah, yeah, I think that those two things are kind of tied together. They're very difficult to separate, right? But the thing that matters the most when you're talking about, what's too much grit? When does grit become counterproductive or damaging to you or the business? The answer really is you need to be aware of your grit and you need to have a bit of an outside view on it. So sometimes this can it can kind of help to have like a coach or a mentor or an advisor, someone who can kind of give you a sounding board and a gut check. I absolutely advocate for entrepreneurs, business owners to have a coach. That's not really something that I do, but I tell them to, go find a coach that you can work with because they're going to provide that gut check. So you got to think about who your coach is going to be. It shouldn't be someone that just says yes to you all the time. It should actually be someone that you have a respectfully fractious relationship with, someone that you're going to butt heads with once in a while. That's the kind of person who's going to be honest with you and tell you that, your grit is crossing into stubbornness, let it go, or else there will probably be some negative repercussions from this.
Been there, done that. To
Yep.
you, what is the difference between, and I understand what you're saying about coach, having a coach. My very first coach listened to me whine and cry way, way longer than she should have, really. But finally, she just said, Denise, and I went, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. She's going to quit. And she said, Denise, what are you tolerating? That
Mm,
opened up everything for me because I was
mhm,
tolerating from other people, but mostly I was tolerating my own garbage.
mm, mhm,
And once I
mhm,
figured that out, I went, oh, well, okay.
mhm,
But
mhm,
I wanted to ask you, to you, what is the difference between having a coach and or a mentor or both? Where do they
mhm,
show up?
mhm, mhm. Yeah, those words they tend to be used interchangeably, right?
They and they're not. I wish people understood that. They're
Yeah.
not interchangeable.
Yeah, yeah. I tend to think of a coach as someone who will give you direct feedback on your performance, the things that are happening right now. The things that are kind of on the near horizon, planning for the very actionable, the very kind of movement, momentum oriented things that are in your business or your life. A coach is for that. A mentor, on the other hand, is someone that you can learn perspective from. They're someone who can help you to evolve a little bit, to be, a better version of yourself. And they really put in place kind of the pokings and the proddings, the nudges that you need to kind of be mindful of that journey of self-improvement over time. Those are different skill sets. You're right. They're different skill sets, and I think that you've got to go looking for them in your coach or your mentor actively. I'm not entirely sure that they just drop in our laps without some effort. Though if that was the case, man, would it be nice? It'd make a lot of things easier, right?
I did have, and he's still my mentor, so I got very, very lucky. I did have Ben Gay the third drop right into my lap. He's
Oh
my
wow.
my Wednesday podcast host, but he was the final mentee of Dr. Napoleon Hill. And
Oh.
so much of what I learn from Ben every week is coming down from Dr. Napoleon Hill. It doesn't get better than that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, that's great. Yeah, if you have, and that's the thing. Like a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be, if you're an entrepreneur, a mentor doesn't necessarily have to be someone that's in the business world, right?
No,
Because it's
not at all.
more of a self-improvement kind of relationship. So if you've got family like a wise old uncle that you look up to that you can learn from, like that person can be your mentor as you're on that entrepreneurial journey. It's just about asking the questions and being open to what they say. And I find that that's often one of the biggest barriers that we have to surpass as entrepreneurs, the openness to feedback from others, because we're so used to just putting our heads down, running down the field, got to get there, got to get there, got to get there, don't look up, that we sometimes aren't really open to feedback. And that's an important thing to get past.
Or we don't understand it when it comes our way. I mean,
Yep.
I'm guilty of that. I mean, I've had
Yeah.
so many people over the years say, Denise, you know everything there is to know about podcasting. Why don't you teach it? I don't know. That's my answer. I don't know. I might do it one day. So I am
Yep.
working on that. But you have worked globally and locally. So what
Yep.
strengths do local first founders tend to underestimate in themselves? And I just kind of mentioned that I underestimate myself frequently. I don't know
Yeah,
of
we all do.
why, but we all do.
Yeah, yeah, we all do. So and this is one of the things that I run into a lot in talking with folks who are thinking about starting a business. They assume that because they're local, they're small, that they can't compete with the Amazons of the world or the Walmarts of the world or the Targets of the world or what have you. They say, "Oh, geez, those companies are huge. My coffee shop is not going to survive that, or my coffee mug shop, whatever, not going to survive that because they're just so big." But the biggest advantage a local first founder has and a local business has is that they are embedded in their community of customers right from day one. They can have those direct one-to-one conversations about what people need, whereas a huge global, national, even regional organization, they can't do that. They can a little bit performatively here and there, but you get to a certain size as a business, as an organization, and you lose the ability to listen one to one or one
That's
to a small group and
everybody
take
write that
what,
down. Listen.
yeah,
Okay, keep
yeah,
going.
yeah. And when a business gets to a certain size, it almost always loses that ability to listen to small groups of customers in local areas. So the local entrepreneur, someone who's thinking about a community business, they can move a heck of a lot faster and be much more responsive than any large national or international chain ever could. That is your superpower. Lean into it.
And listen, I agree with you. And I'm finding, even though I'm not out there and about, running around my little town or even the towns next to me, I just don't want to. I really
Mm-hmm.
don't. But
Mm-hmm.
I am noticing locally and even online digitally that people want to have some kind of connection,
Yep.
especially after COVID. People are like,
Yep.
yeah, I can grab something from Amazon, and I do. I'm one of their biggest customers, I swear.
Mm-hmm.
But if I want something that's going to be personal, like right now for Christmas shopping, I'm not going to Amazon. I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking locally. I'm looking for things that mean something, that they're thoughtful.
Mm-hmm.
They're thoughtful gifts, or, you know, my sister was here. She came here from California not too long ago, and she's like, she'd never been here. And she said, "Oh my gosh, it is so interesting here." Now she wants, Tony Chachere seasoning. She wants, hot sauce. It's down
Yeah.
the road. I can go get it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
do things like that. Look around and see where you can really make a difference with your customers, your clients. And as a customer, go look for these people.
Yep, absolutely. My wife and I this year, this Christmas, we've given ourselves a challenge, and we're doing pretty well with it so far. The challenge is that for everyone we do gifts with, we exchange gifts with, at least one thing will be from a business that is within 10 kilometers of 5 miles of where we are. So we've challenged ourselves to do that, and like it's actually working. And I think that in part is because technology platforms have developed in such a way that it is now super, super simple and straightforward for any main street shop, any local producer, small batch manufacturer, whatever, to sell online. So,
Oh,
for
Shopify.
yeah,
Yeah.
Shopify. No,
I'm
there's
moving
tons of
right now. I'm moving a huge website that I built, oh gosh, 10, 12 years ago. It's still running. I mean, that's how
yep,
good of a site this was.
yeah,
But we're now moving the whole thing to Shopify, and that's interesting. But it's going to make
yeah.
a big difference, I think.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been working with quite a few local retailers, kind of very hyper local community Main Street kind of shops on a business model where they're operating their retail store like they always have. They're acquiring that foot traffic like they always have. They're doing their thing like they always have, but we're augmenting that with a Shopify storefront. So then that gives those hyper local businesses the option to sell in store as they always have, with if you use Shopify's point of sale, all of your inventory is kind of integrated and it's the same pool, so you don't have stock outages. But you operate your brick and mortar like you always have, but you can have buy now, pick up in store. So someone can buy online, swing by the store, pick it up if they want, or just have it fulfilled directly online, right? There's a huge opportunity for local retailers to adopt models like that. The technology is more available than it's ever been, and it's less expensive than it's ever been.
Right,
That's
right.
another thing that helps those local businesses compete with the big players like Amazon.
Well, during COVID, after COVID, you gotta be driving to my little local grocery store, not Walmart, but they, I got lost one day. They moved the horse barn and I couldn't find. In the South, we don't listen to directions. I fight with my nav system. She's not the boss of me. And we really
Yeah,
don't look at
yeah.
signs. They
Turn
moved out.
left at the oak tree, yeah, for
That's
sure.
exactly right. I got lost and it's only 3 miles away. So, but I kept seeing even during COVID, I would see all these brand spanking new businesses pop up. And I kept saying, people can't go anywhere. How in the world are you affording this? And you just
Mm,
explained it. They were digital on
hmm
top of it. I didn't know. I just
hmm
remember thinking, oh, you're going to go bankrupt next week. I mean, I was worried.
hmm hmm
I'll be
No,
darned.
I think there's a heck of an opportunity, and it's just anecdotal, but I think that AI and the technologies around AI, agentic AI, and everything that we're kind of talking about working with whatever right now, I have a sneaking suspicion that AI and heavily automation based technologies are going to hollow out a little bit, cause a lot of consolidation and collapse for medium-sized businesses. But I think those technologies are going to really give small businesses a turbocharge, like a shot in the arm. I have a feeling that that's what's going to happen from AI and from those automation technologies, because they'll make it easier for the really small players to compete in the same way that the medium players would have in the past.
Anytime we have had any kind of an uproar, COVID is the most recent, obviously, but you know, when when the economy just goes to heck and really
Hmm
goes, new things come up, new things pop up,
hmm
and they're almost always better than what was there, or they replace what was
Yep.
there. So, what I'm hearing from you is be on the lookout. Look for new
Oh,
things to do. Look for new technologies. Look for new mentors. Look for new coach. Be on the lookout. Always find what you need. And it's out there. You just have to know what to look
absolutely.
for.
Absolutely. Another part of that, and I kind of think about this the same way that I do, a fire in the forest. You have a fire, goes through the forest, very destructive, very bad. There are problems with that. But what's left behind when a forest burns is the seeds that you need from
The
an
new
ecological
growth.
standpoint for
Right.
new growth. Yeah, it's all part of that same process. Business is the same way. And for folks who have been thinking about starting a business or pursuing, working for yourself, solopreneurship, micro entrepreneurship, what have you, if you think today is a terrible time to do it, so you should wait until conditions are better, let me challenge you to ponder this. When conditions are better, more people will also be thinking about it and doing it. So you'll have more competition. Wouldn't it be better to start now, even if it's harder, and you
And
don't
learn as you
reach the
go.
same degree of success and
Right.
learn as you go and have a head start for when things are better? Because that head start, that's a big deal.
It really is. And, I see this a lot in the podcasting industry. People say, "Oh, well, I'm not quite ready." When things when it gets a little bit better, when it gets a little easier, it's never going to get easier.
Yep.
Podcasting is so easy. Is it time constricting sometimes? Yeah, you bet. Is it
Hmm.
hard
Hmm.
work? Absolutely. But if you wait, there's going to be 1,000 other people in front of you.
Yep. Yep. The
It's
best time
just
to
that
start
easy.
something, best
Now,
time to start something new was yesterday. Second best time is
yep,
now.
that's exactly right. And again, Dr. Napoleon Hill, people say, "Oh, I've read Think and Grow Rich, but I'm not really sure what it was all about." And he says it multiple times in that
Hmm.
book. Take action. You just said it.
Yep.
Take action.
Yep.
Listen, we are running out of time. Listen, I want you to come back in the new year if you would. I had written out a whole bunch of questions and thoughts to share with you, and I'm going through my crossouts, and there's a whole bunch more. So would you come? You need to come back if you would.
I would absolutely love to come back.
And when is your book going to be ready? Do you know?
Sometime next year. It's been something that I've been interested in for a while. I've always thought that entrepreneurship was a great vehicle for improvement and kind of building better communities around us. And I just have been sitting down here and there writing little bits and pieces. I think that I'm probably about three-quarters of the way through the draft. So sometime next year it should be ready. But for folks who are kind of interested in the conversation and have been listening along, thinking, "Oh, I'd read that book," if you go to my website, sixcatalyst.com/your partner in success, there's a little sign up form at the bottom of the page there. You can put in your email, and I'll send you a draft chapter to read for free. And just hit the reply button and tell me what you thought. But the full book next year sometime, hopefully the first half.
Well, keep me posted. And once that book is ready, I love to interview authors. I've got hundreds, literally hundreds of books in this room, and I've read every single one of them. So you just keep me posted, stay in touch.
And I'll send you a copy, so it'll be hundreds plus one.
Oh, right. It's going to be thousands pretty soon. I have three bookcases in here. They're loaded, and now it's overflowing into a giant basket. And I need a new wall, but I'm not building a new house. I'll have to figure it out.
Yeah.
But I do read them. Well, Paul, thank you so much for joining us today on your Partner in Success Radio. And before we say goodbye, if you would share one tip with every new entrepreneur for building a strong business that also strengthens their community, what would it be?
Keep an open mind and listen.
That's my favorite word. Shut up and listen is the whole sentence. But yeah, sometimes you just have to listen. You have to go find things. They're not going to necessarily find you.
100%. That's why you got to listen.
Right. Okay, so for anyone who wants to connect with you, and you just gave us a little bit of information and continue to learn from your insights, where's the best place for them to find you? Was it your website? Is it LinkedIn? I know you've got a blog, I believe. Where do you want people to
Yeah.
go?
Yeah, if you just head on over to my website, sixcatalyst.com, you can find links out to connect with me on LinkedIn. You can find a sign up for my Substack, which is just a newsletter that I write weekly for folks who are considering entrepreneurship. It's a lot like this conversation. Some weeks are a lot more tactical, a lot more kind of hands-on. Some weeks are a little bit kind of big picture thinking like this. So if you, it's all free, go there, follow along, and that's probably where you can find me the most readily.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. And do come back. I'll call you in just a little bit and we'll get you set up for probably April or May. I'm booked 6 months out, which is
Yeah.
shocking, but I'm booked that far out. So listen, everybody, today's conversation with Paul Austin-Menear was a powerful reminder that entrepreneurship, it's not just about building a business, it's about building community, purpose, and resilience. Cast iron stomach, remember that. We talked about why starting, hang on a second. Sorry, we talked about why starting small can still create big impact, how entrepreneurship helps clarify your values, why staying close to your customers and listening to them leads to better solutions, and how a local first mindset can become the foundation for broader influence. And of course, We explored the founder's mindset itself, curiosity, problem solving, and perseverance as a genuine asset to the communities we serve. So thank you for joining us. I am Denise Griffitts, and I will see you every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Paul, thank you so much.
It's been a pleasure.
It really has. Thank you.